everyone, and welcome to the SSPI podcast by Space and Satellite Professionals International. I'm Tamara Bond-Williams, Executive Director of SSPI. This episode of the SSPI podcast is part of our Better Satellite World track of conversations exploring how our industry is making a difference in the world. Accelerate Change, sponsored by SES, continues with our exploration of collaboration as an engine of innovation across the space and satellite industry. In our episode today, which is called Sovereignty Enabled, we're looking at how Aerospacelab is rewriting the satellite manufacturing playbook by combining vertical integration with agile manufacturing. Aerospacelab is helping nations and companies achieve sovereign space capability faster, simpler, and at greater scale through collaboration. We're joined today by Tina Ghataore, Global Chief Strategy and Revenue Officer at Aerospacelab. Tina joined Aerospacelab in 2023 after senior leadership roles at Mynaric, Yasat, and Panasonic Avionics, and an early career at Boeing Satellite Systems. She spent decades at the intersection of aerospace innovation and commercial strategy, from in-flight connectivity to optical links in space. Tina, welcome back to the podcast.
Tamara, thank you for having me. Thank you, SSPI.
Absolutely. Well, I want to also just acknowledge SES. They wanted to champion this conversation about the tool of collaboration to accelerate change. And they specifically asked for you to be one of their guests in this podcast series. So I want to make sure that we call that out because they have high regard for you. So I'm just going to start right here if I can. Traditional satellite manufacturing has a long lead times and, of course, very complex supply chains. And we're very familiar with all of that. But how is Aerospacelab rewriting that playbook, and what role does vertical integration with agile manufacturing play?
Excellent question. And I too would like to add my thanks to the SES team and also congratulate them on their completion of their merger with acquisition of Intelsat, I should say. Mm-hmm. And, they have been a renowned operator, a global operator, serving many, many markets, and are doing great things by challenging a diverse set of both traditional and non-traditional players in the industry to partake in what I would call the next generation of communication services that are offered via satellite. So that feeds directly into our identity as a satellite manufacturer at Aerospacelab. We're a 7-year-old company. And, we've gotten to where we are with 9 satellites in LEO orbit and capabilities that we have developed in-house. Vertical integration is at the core of our strategy. And what that really means is, through pain, through joy, through innovation, our founder and CEO had the foresight of, really looking at breaking the status quo in terms of how we tap into a workforce, a supply chain, industry components that are not traditional aerospace components, but borrowing from the successes out of the automotive sector. So I give him all the credit for bringing the company to where it's at and assembling a team, including myself and our colleagues, that can take us to the next step. And so where we come in and break the mold is essentially the know-how. We've got a great team of both seasoned actors from around the world and some very smart, innovative, question the status quo, young employee base. And so we marry those two together. And we believe in very sort of quick turnaround demonstration. So the minimum viable product is something we live and breathe, and we like to demonstrate, put hardware on the table, as we say, or hardware in flight, and really show capability of all the things that we've developed. So that whole vertical integration story at the subsystem level feeds the success that we've had to date and the success we will have in the future. When we're looking at the larger constellations, that's always been in our vision, and is start on the in-orbit demonstration missions for our customers, and then really play in the multiple satellite constellation programs, whether it's for Earth observation or telecommunications. We play in both of those realms, and so we are pushing forward in that market with our global customers, and really fueled through some of the early decisions around vertical integration, made possible through some of those strategies around how we choose components, how we bring those together, and how we test and put things in orbit for demonstration to give us a heritage we need to be taken seriously.
Yeah. Let me take a step back, if I may, because I have one idea of what vertical integration means, but I'm not sure that I'm connecting the dots. So why don't you walk me through specifically when we're talking about satellite manufacturing, and you mentioned a couple of sectors, the Earth observation sector being one. What does vertical integration mean in that context?
Great. Absolutely. I think it's important because vertical integration means so many different things to different people. In our company, or as a satellite manufacturer, a typical satellite manufacturer, if we look at the anatomy of a satellite, you've generally got at a high level a payload that serves a mission need. So it could be an Earth observation sensor payload that takes pictures of different resolutions, et cetera, et cetera. So that's considered a payload, or a telecommunication payload that allows for different levels of communication. It used to be DBS, one way, where we get our satellite TV, or it's two-way communications that enables all of our enterprise communications and personal communications. The thing that holds it together, the payload needs a platform, also called the satellite bus. And that comes in various sizes and flavors, right? Depending on how it's put together, based on the launch vehicle, volume, mass, capability, etc. And the industry has evolved from really big satellites that flew in GEO to the adoption of LEO satellites, to unique orbits like the MEO orbit that SES is capitalizing on. But what maketh the bus or the platform are the guts inside. The guts inside are essentially what commonly we call our subsystems that power the satellites, that have tracking capabilities, that have antennas, that have propulsion. They're various subsystems that are the guts of the platform that keep the payload and operate the satellite itself, keep it in orbit. So these are essentially the guts. The guts is where many, like us, focus on trying to internalize and vertically integrate. And what does that mean? We want to build that in-house. So if you can build the guts in-house, you can be creative on how you package it, how you pull the best performance out of those subsystems, combining maybe a couple of the boxes if you have constraints, or you want to be more efficient when it comes to your volume and mass constraints maybe. But be creative on how you can package all of this. And maybe you're looking for some type of specification that some standard product out there doesn't have. So that's one aspect of it, right? You are looking for something that when you look at a commercial off-the-shelf COTS product from a company, it doesn't give you what you want. Maybe it doesn't give you the the power levels you need to operate your satellite or your payload, or from a propulsion standpoint, it doesn't give you the impulse to, orbit raise to where you want it fast enough, etc. So that's one side of the thing. Your specifications aren't there, so you're forced to vertically integrate. Second is, as a startup, we've experienced this. You call up a large supplier and they don't respond. It's like, you're buying, in all fairness, you're buying onesie twosies initially as a startup, and you are at the bottom of the pile on some of these major suppliers, time to respond to or address. So you are forced to consider, well, how do I do this? Third is price points. When you look at some of these prices that are out there on some of these subsystems, it might be that those subsystems were created with radiation hardened aerospace components, which have to go through a lot of testing, and there's R&D invested, and so the companies are trying to recoup that. But there are creative ways to go around that, or maybe your requirements are just less stringent. You don't need a 15-year lifetime on a particular component in your subsystem, and you can live with 5 or you can live with 3. So there's several factors that have led the industry in general, but specifically manufacturers like us, to say, how do we build the guts ourselves to make this, to win, to get more value out of the product, to get the specification we need, to get the flexibility we need to offer some customization, but still be able to scale. So those are all factors that go into verticalization at the satellite manufacturer level. In other industries, it could mean, a manufacturer decides to become a launch vehicle provider, or a manufacturer becomes a satellite service provider.
That's usually how I think of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so thank you very much for that. That was really helpful in terms of just laying the groundwork of what you guys are doing and why. And so I think that kind of brings me into another area that I'm kind of curious about. Does that ability to create the insides, the guts, as you call it, of the satellite to specification, so that it's not a one size fits all. It's not the thing off the shelf and it's like built for lots of different applications, but it's built for this application and it makes sense, and therefore it drives down costs. I think that's how I'm understanding that. Does that support the other idea that I wanted to talk about, which was this idea of sovereignty, which has become a big buzzword in the industry as different nations are building out their space programs, and they're wanting to have their own space assets that are secured to their needs. Are you well positioned for that because of that kind of vertical integration and agile manufacturing, or is that a totally separate issue?
Sovereignty is something that is, a topic du jour, I would say, and a necessity, actually. It's coming from nations concerned about having access to communication, having access to imagery and data, and sovereignty comes into play, not just, for the usual in the old days, pride, the race to the moon kind of thing. It's not really about that. It's more concern regarding security. Right. In my mind, it's stemming from security, whether it's information security, a fiber line gets cut off for an island and you are stranded. You cannot operate as a country, an island country. Or you have the situation unfortunate situation with Ukraine, where you are dealing, a whole continent and the world is dealing with that situation where you are reliant on communication for keeping people safe, and you are relying on imagery to know what your adversary is doing. And so the neighboring nations, NATO and etc., are thinking very hard about making sure that they have access to sovereign space assets. They don't want their communications shut off because one nation has had the monopoly or has the largest deployed base of satellites out there that provide these communications, but at time of need can cut them off. So that's where the need is stemming from. Mm-hmm. How are we positioned to address that need? Uniquely, because the way we've built the technology, we don't have restrictions into selling to, our friendly nations. There are different, we're not, the ITAR rules don't apply to us in Europe. We are under EAR, so there's regulatory rules applicable to the products that we're able to sell into the friendly nations. We are blessed. We don't have to deal with that scenario, whether it's for our sensor payloads or whether it's for our satellite infrastructure. We're able to sell into those markets. What those markets do want, and it's not a blanket, they all want that, they do want some in-country capability, technology transfer, knowledge transfer. So they're asking for that to, fuel some of their countries' capabilities, whether it's, European nations of the former Eastern Bloc that are thinking, wow, I'm too close to my adversary, but I want to build capability. I have the engineering talent, I have the technology talent, but I could use some help. So there are those that we're able to support. And then there are the more affluent nations that say, I've been paying United States or Europe a lot of money for many, many years. I'd like to bring this capability in country. So they're going to require setting up factories in their countries, real technology transfer from an IP standpoint. Those are things that are going to be required. And as a private company, we are well positioned, and it really depends on not having a regulatory roadblock or a roadblock from investors in how we address sovereign opportunities, right, for the friendly nations, whether it's Japan, whether it's UAE, whether it's a country in Europe. These are things that we're well positioned to address.
You are listening to The Better Satellite World, the longest-running continuous podcast in the commercial space and satellite industry. The Better Satellite World podcast is funded by the corporate partners of SSPI, Hughes, Access Intelligence, the American Space Exploration Fund, and Qvia. Have you heard about SBQ? Space Business Qualified is a popular online learning program for industry professionals designed by GSOA, SSPI, and SatProf. To learn more, visit spacebq.org. In September and November, join SSPI and the New York Space Alliance for the next New York Space Business Roundtable. If you want to get inside the industry's biggest issues and investments, meet startups and high-profile industry leaders from around the world, the Roundtable is a real New York event you cannot miss. You can now register for our next New York Space Business Roundtable, which will be on September 30th. Call or raise Europe Bets on Sovereign Space. To register for this upcoming roundtable, visit sspi.org/events. And now back to the Better Satellite World.
And so who are you collaborating with in order to, like you say, let's imagine an island nation that you have to step into those environments. Who are your collaborators? Are they the regulators in the nation? Are there other companies on the ground that you might be collaborating with? How do you make it go?
Yeah, so it's really a country by country strategy here, because when you're trying to deal with a sovereign nation, you generally or sovereign program, you're generally dealing with some sort of a governmental entity, whether it's defense or institutional, right? So I can give you an example of a recent success win we've had with JAXA, a space agency in Japan. We were able to win a satellite platform program, but it's not a direct contract because our on-the-ground partner is Mitsui Bussan Aerospace. I'm sorry for butchering that. Our friends at MBA were involved in a 2-year campaign with us where a European country is going to help build the platform. The payload is coming from JAXA, and we're going to collaborate and deliver on this particular mission. It's called the Samurai mission that we announced. Similarly,
Wow.
we've campaigns with other nations where we have a VHR sub 50 centimeter, GSD as we call it, a VHR satellite that we launched a year ago to demonstrate the fact that we could build that payload, and we have a versatile satellite platform. Now we've been approached by various nations who want that capability in a constellation form of, whether it's a dozen or more satellite, because they want persistent imagery of a particular, of the location or a particular region. So we have bids into some of these opportunities, and whether it's through a on-the-ground satellite operator that doesn't have the manufacturing capability, but has the access to the end customer, meaning potentially a MOD of that country, for example. And what I find is this is all about a go-to-market strategy. So I like to tell my team that we're not going to hire a sales force of 100 people to try to go and address opportunities in each of these countries. We're going to look for partners that make sense to us, partners with the same values that we have, agility, innovation, providing the product the customer needs at an affordable, competitive price. So this is what we look at in terms of the right ingredient to enter into a market to pursue sovereign opportunities. My team and I don't have the bandwidth to address the world today. I'd like to, but we're very strategically focused on a set of countries. And being in Europe, we can address Europe quite easily, but we're focused on some specific countries in Asia. We're focused on some specific countries in the Middle East. Here in the US and North America, I would say, we've had successes with commercial customers, but we do have challenges in dealing with deploying hardware into US government programs, for example.
Mm-hmm. Is that because of the ITAR regulations? Is that still a barrier since you're coming out of Europe?
It's actually a few different things that may be more, they're not ground rules per se, but it's just industry, perceptions, or take for example, right now there's a big buzz in the US regarding the Golden Dome, and everybody is talking about how do we access the 25 billion, and everybody assumes it's all going to be US companies that can tap into that. Leadership right at the top of that says time is of the essence. We need to launch this capability, and we will go to our allies if we need it. There's an international strategy associated with that. Now, that may not connect clearly with the procurement heads and various system integrators or primes that say, I can only buy American. That's not what that strategy says. That says we need a capability. Yes, we're to try to buy it from in country because we can buy it quickly, or we have the tremendous industry base here. But I don't see anywhere where it says you can't buy from your allies. Similarly, in Europe, we've got a great program at the moment that is being put together and is coming together on the IRIS² program, and our friends at SES and Eutelsat and Hispasat are all involved. It's a public-private partnership in launching a sovereign constellation for Europe, or several, different. There's a LEO component, there's a MEO component, and there it's also tap into the European industrial aerospace base, traditional and non-traditional. But there might be some real need for components and parts that have to come from the outside. And so these are all the considerations when these systems are planned, are need to take place. But if you bring that down to the procurement of these parts, components, subsystems, platforms, you have to have consistency, because otherwise you could really slow things down. You could lock the process down and say, Aerospacelab has great platforms, amazingly affordable price. We acquired a company called Amos, which is 40-year veteran of all things optical, payloads and sensors and the like, and mirrors and astronomy telescopes. Now, I personally think that we've got great product that could fit into various components of the Golden Dome. But the time to get that in front of the right people and the go-to-market and all the tactics involved to win that business, we have to weigh where we put our resources. Do we put it there, or do we put it into more commercial pursuits? So this is kind of a really, the go-to-market strategy has to be very well thought through and resourced. And then with a splash of luck, you get there.
Yeah. Yeah. So Amos, I know Amos. That's an Israeli company. It seems like
no. This is the other one. So this is
the other one. Okay.
This is
I was like, wow, that's a big acquisition.
Oh no. I'm glad we let's give me a chance to rectify. Amos is a 40-year-old Belgium company out of Liège.
Okay.
And think about all those sophisticated, large telescopes for astronomy that are out there. Amos has built many of those that are out there. Think of European Space Agency missions where these different payloads, whether it's a hyperspectral payload or some other sensor payloads, where Amos likely has components, whether it's mirrors that they've made, full telescopes. So a very well-established, well-known in the sector company. And so really when someone's looking for sophisticated payloads in the optical realm, and also telescopes for space situational awareness, SDA, space domain awareness, or very precision telecom telescopes for optical ground terminals, this is what Amos provides. And it was very synergistic for us to make that acquisition last year. Okay.
It makes so much more sense now. I was like, oh, that's an interesting acquisition. Yeah. Okay. Well, let me take a gander on the other side here of the commercial industry, right? So obviously, this way that you have of approaching manufacture, of being able to do vertical integration so that it's applicable and I don't want to keep saying the same word agile, right? But what you described to me was that sometimes things are built to scale for wide applications, but in commercial applications, you really might want it to be built to scale for more specificity, because it's more cost effective that way than paying for some capability that you actually don't need. Am I thinking about that the right way? And has that been the experience of Aerospacelab?
Yeah, I think you could phrase it in a way where you say some of the commercial actors now, some of the satellite operators, let's zero in on the folks, right, who are putting who desire to move from what was traditionally the GEO arc and the GEO satellites into the LEO investments or the MEO investments that they've made, and now are well accepted, and end services are being delivered right today to you, me, and the enterprise. So those commercial actors have said technology cycles are really 3 to 5 year cycles now. Like, we're getting new tech all the time. Chips, triple E parts are improving. We're capitalizing on automotive industry parts and qualifying them for radiation hardening and or withstand radiation environments, right? So those guys have, I would say, relaxed their requirements a little bit from potential lifetime and things, and are able to take certain risks in terms of I'm willing to take a risk of launching a constellation that's only going to be working for 5 years because it'll be cheaper. So I'm seeing that trend. It's a welcome trend because you are able to keep up with the technology cycle and provide more innovative product and services for the LEO operators, whether it's what Telesat Lightspeed's going to do, and what the other very vertically integrated players like Kuiper and Starlink are doing. Right, their initial batch of satellites not going to look anything like the next batch, kind of thing. And now we've got direct-to-device coming into play as a new application. So those players recognize that they're connecting with devices on the ground, user terminals, whether it's the phone in your and my hand, or terminals that are going to be on vehicles, ships, etc. And all that technology is really accelerating and moving forward. So we can't have old technology in the satellite, right? So I think there's some relaxation of long lifetime requirements that's permitting the improved cycles of innovation, but at an affordable price point. Now you can build LEO satellites, and don't fall off your chair, for $1 million, $2 million, right?
Wow.
And depending on the power levels, etc. And even geo satellites, there are claims out there that people can make them for 30, 50 million. They call them micro geos. And there are some aggressive targets on how much people want to pay for MEO satellites in the future. Aggressive, but achievable, because there's that negotiation between the services that we need in, let's say, 3 to 5 years from now, because we're still trying to predict those, the user patterns, the user traffic models, the technology that's enabling them, and the fact that we've retired risk on certain new technologies, and we have many, many more players in the market. So there's competition, and you're not just, being price gouged with some of the bigger players who are sitting around feeling very, happy, but right at their, companies like Aerospacelab are coming and chopping at their heels and saying, but I can deliver a better product for less price. And that's helping the industry. It's waking up the satellite operators to say, wow, they know they can get the service that they need. They're doing their due diligence on companies like us. Are they technically capable? Do they have the resources, whether it's people, whether it's money, whether it's the numerous factories to deliver? They are doing their due diligence. So I think this is a welcome change in our industry. And I just like to see more non-traditional players given an even playing field to bid for some of these projects.
Yeah. What you were talking about that, and what was striking me, we've been having a couple of conversations, and one of the conversations we're having is with Qvia and the use of AI, right? And that's just one thing. Of course, that's another buzzy thing in the industry right now. And of course, globally, it's a buzzy thing. But you talk about the rate of innovation, and it's astounding right now. And it's like we're in a second wave of new space right now. That's how I feel. Um, and and so you have to be able to build things that can live and die quickly, because the next batch of technology is going to come really fast, and stuff that's out there is going to be obsolete really fast. I mean, I feel like that's true, because that just seems to be what it looks like right now.
It really is. And let's pick on solar arrays as an example. Those are expensive subsystems, right? Because we were using, different technologies for the actual cells. And then lo and behold, someone says, well, why can't I use terrestrial silicon cells and test those things? And what if I add a cover glass? Or what if I can do this? What kind of performance deficit am I going to get by not going with germanium cells or something like that, or gallium arsenide? Whichever technology, because those are expensive, right? And scarce. And so people tried out silicon cells of different kinds. Then they looked at how to package those cells on different kind of arrays, and the designs of the arrays. And what do you have? You have cheaper power on a satellite.
Yes.
And cheaper power on the satellite affords you more capability, especially when you look at a constellation design. Our teams were doing the overall in the build of materials. When you look at all the different subsystems and the costs associated with them, when you look at constellations, there's a significant chunk of the build of materials that the cost of that is actually assigned to power that's generated out of solar arrays. So that's just one element, but compute power is getting better and better. Propulsion, you've got different propulsions. It's not just chemical anymore, it's electric propulsion. Then there's, whether it's xenon or krypton, the trade studies of what's more expensive, what gives you more impulse. There's iodine propulsion. So the innovation cycles allow us to launch, as you say, live and kill at the same time in a cycle. And, we have to be good citizens and clean up after ourselves. So
yeah, I was just going there.
I know. I remind myself, let's not just throw too much junk up in space, but we should try to clean up after ourselves as well. So I'm excited to see that there are companies that are not only creating those capabilities of clean up space, so to speak, but also are providing the hardware, or at least saying, if you put this hardware on your satellite platform or design it in for your next constellation, when we have a cleanup vehicle, we can come and clean up the space. And then the regulators are, of course, very closely following all this and are going to bring some regulations into play so that we're all good citizens and not having too much junk in space.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, Tina. I was going to say, when we think about the innovation, collaboration, and vertical integration, that piece of it, the end piece, the end of life stage of any kind of satellite that goes up, or even rockets, but I'm thinking right now of satellites. It seems like building those integrations and those collaborations now before it goes up must be really helpful in terms of future payoff, and also future regulations, because we know the regulations, if they're not already here, are coming about being able to effectively clean up, like you say, clean up behind ourselves in space.
Yeah. Yes. And, let's give a shout out to folks like, Astroscale, who are doing things in terms of saying, hey, look, we've got a piece of hardware, put it on your satellite, and then in the future we can come with our tug and move you out of the way, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And there are others. There's solar sail companies out of Europe. The name is escaping me right now, but I know we've looked at how we can incorporate that into our platform so that we can deorbit. Before in the geo arc, it used to be orbit raise, keep enough fuel, orbit raise, get out of that arc. And now it's like, well, how do we bring you down and when you're in LEO, mm-hmm. Do you have the propulsion to bring you down, or do you have an alternative technology solution to bring you down? And then, in the future, there's the refueling companies that are looking at saying, hey, why don't we have now, we're recycling rockets, but can we not recycle satellites and prolong their lifetimes by fueling them, etc.? So I think there's a nice balance to strike amongst all of those things, and hopefully not overregulate, but make sure that there's good citizenship involved there as well.
Yeah. Well, Tina, thank you so much. I learned so much in this conversation. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited to see where our Aerospacelab goes next. And I'm excited for the collaboration we're having. I'm very grateful for your support of SSPI, your support of SSPI Wise. So thank you again for being here on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for SES nominating us to be part of this podcast.
Absolutely. And that concludes today's episode, Sovereignty Enabled. We are grateful to Tina Ghataore of Aerospacelab for joining us. This podcast is made possible by the support of SSPI's professional, student, and corporate members. We're especially grateful for our corporate partners, Access Intelligence, producers of Via Satellite Magazine, the American Space Exploration Fund, formerly known as the Space Shuttle Children's Trust Fund, the law firm of Clyde & Company, Hughes and EchoStar Company, and Qvia, our newest corporate partner. To learn more about SSPI, visit sspi.org and follow us on X at SSPI, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. New episodes of the SSPI podcast, including the Better Satellite World podcast, the Satellite Futures podcast, and She Reaches Women in Space, are released every Monday. Subscribe at sspi.org/SSPI-podcast. Subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can also subscribe to our podcast as well as our other videos on YouTube at SSPI Video, all one word. For SSPI and our producer, Ari Yates, I'm Tamara Bond-Williams. And for the people and companies building a space and satellite future worthy of our highest aspirations, thank you for all you do.